Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths, making them plain and straight. That's Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard these verses before, possibly many, many times. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths, make your paths plain, make your paths straight. And there is something really comforting about this text. After all, none of us want to be confused or to be unsure about which path to take. Whether it's in finances or relationships or some kind of moral decision or anything else, we want security along our way, and we would prefer to avoid disaster. And so we acknowledge him in all our ways. Acknowledge him. What does that actually mean? Does it mean that we say we are a Christian? What does it mean to acknowledge him in all our ways? And what ways? Well, let's dig into this a little bit deeper, and when we really get this, we're never going to have to worry about not knowing which way to go. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths, making them plain and straight. Now this, of course, obviously is the English translation. It wasn't written in English, it was written in Hebrew. So let's go to the Hebrew and consider for just a moment the fuller meanings of the words that are used here, that are translated. Do not lean on your own understanding. Now the word translated lean on means to trust in. It can also mean to dwell in. When you have a decision to make and you do not understand all of the pieces of the situation, all of the things involved, are you tempted to maybe panic just a little bit or to dwell in some level of anxiety? Fear. We tend to fear what we do not understand, don't we? Why do you suppose that is? Because our trust is not fully in God. Instead, our trust is in our own understanding. And why do you suppose that is? Well, because of the second definition of the word translated there. We dwell in our understanding. Or you could say we dwell in the mind. The mental chatter. The mental perceptions. The mental filter through which we perceive and we judge and we label and we unknowingly assume. And we believe those assumptions. Now, recently, somebody with whom I'd interacted told another person about a short meeting that we had had, and she said that I was glaring at her. Now, her mind told her that I was glaring, or possibly that I should have been glaring, and therefore was, at her, and she believed it as absolute fact. And you know what? All of us have done this. Every single one of us. If we are not careful to be fully present right now, we will do it habitually, even without realizing we're doing it. Assuming, jumping to conclusions that aren't actually true. So we dwell in the human mind, and by doing so, we think that it is us. That voice in the head. We think it is us speaking or thinking. The perceptions in the head. We think it is us knowing things. The thoughts in the head. We think must be true, otherwise we wouldn't be thinking them, would we? Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. Or you could put it like this: trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not dwell in or rely upon your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths, making them plain and straight. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. What does that actually mean? Well, the word translated acknowledge actually means this: to know by experience, to be aware of, to discern, to discover, to feel, to perceive. And as we'll see in a moment, we tend to not know how to actually do those things. We just know how to think about it. When we say acknowledge, we tend to think of it as a mind thing, like a mental note, or like praying over a meal, like putting the word Christian or God in the name or the description of our business or our organization. But countless godless and satanic things have been done in the name of God or Jehovah or in the name of Christ. So let's return to the definition of the word translated acknowledge: to be aware of. Now we can think about something, but to be aware of something does not require any thought at all. In fact, awareness is misdirected and muddied by compulsive thought. Do you want to be aware of God in the sunlight? Think about it, and you might feel a thrill or stir up the feelings associated in your head with your ideas about God, and maybe with your experiences related to those ideas. And suddenly, the sunlight is a series of thoughts in your head. Or you could say God is in your understanding, your own understanding. You're still relying upon your own understanding in your attempt to know God in all things. Instead of thinking about Him, be aware of Him. Instead of thinking about Him, be aware of Him. And let us pause for effect as the mind flips and turns, trying to turn that one into understanding in which it can rely. Instead of thinking about Him, be aware of Him, without looking for what your understanding is saying you should experience. Not that thinking about God is a bad thing, but we should not trust in our thoughts about Him. Nor should we become so trapped in those thoughts and understandings that our direct perception or awareness of Him is clouded. Now, here's a little experiment that we can try together to give us an example of this. And this is something that we've done in a limited sense before. I would like you to right now, and I will do it too, put your awareness right now into your hands. Not the shape of them or the thoughts about them or even looking at them, but instead just feel them from the inside And I don't mean you should touch them either. But just let them rest on your lap and ask yourself if they are there. Now, it might help you to be a little bit less distracted if you close your eyes. Can you feel that your hands are there? Maybe there's a warmth or a tingling, maybe a slight buzzing, some kind of energy. Don't label it. All those words aren't really important. Just fully feel it. Now, we are going somewhere with this, somewhere good. So just take a few seconds to fully be aware of, to feel without touching, without labeling your hands. Now, if you were fully aware of the life in your hands, your thoughts, at least for a little bit, either stopped or at least they slowed down a little bit. Your awareness came out of the head, out of the mind, out of the mental understanding, and you were simply aware. You were knowing by experience. You were being aware of, discerning, discovering, feeling, perceiving. Now, perhaps the mind was generating feelings of anxiety in an attempt to draw your attention back into itself, into your own understanding. It wants you to dwell in and therefore rely on it, because otherwise it's going to lose its power over you. But if it were to be completely honest with itself, it would realize that it is, in essence, really saying this: do not go into the temple of God's Spirit. You can think about it, but don't actually go into it. Instead, dwell in and rely upon me, your own understanding. And this is something that you should not simply believe. Instead, you should know by experience. Otherwise, your knowing or your understanding is ultimately useless. When you dwell, not in the head, but in the temple, you will know him in all things. Now, let's back up here for just a moment and answer a question that you might be asking, that might be going through the head. What about Jesus? Don't we need to believe in Jesus? And here is a possible answer. If you disbelieve in Jesus, you reject him, you reject what he did, then you will not follow him, you will not trust him, you will not rely upon him, you will not accept his atonement for your sins. But believing, in the sense of the mind's acceptance of something, is something that only ultimately God can grant you. You cannot muster it up yourself. I mean, if somebody could, what belief would they muster up? They would muster up a belief that they already believe is true, wouldn't they? So how can you believe something you do not currently believe? Unless it is a divine gift from God. Consider this. Many people do believe in Jesus, but their actions and their attitudes do not show it. If you truly believe in Him, your life will change. There will be good fruit. So again, mental assent, while it has some value, does not have absolute value. Know Him directly by personal experience, by awareness, by discovery, and trust Him to take care of all the rest. Amen. Okay, back to the temple. Are you lost in thought? Thought can be good. Thought can be necessary for functioning in this world of form. But can you drop it? If not, then you are controlled by it. You are, in essence, leaning on, trusting in, dwelling within your own understanding. So, are you lost in thought? Feel the life in your hands. Does that sound weird or new age? Don't forget that your body is what? Your body is the temple of the Spirit of God. Now, the atheist would say that God is in your head. And we would answer that God is not in our head. And that is more true than we may have actually realized. We can think about Him, but God is where? Where is He? God is in His temple. That's where He lives. That's where He dwells. So don't be afraid to dwell there with Him. Now, the mind will respond with fear and with excuses and with maybe feelings of boredom. And it will try to drag you into fighting with it, since that too is going to keep you lost in it. Just bring your attention back into the temple. Very simple. And maybe you can become aware of the same life that's in your hands, in your arms as well. Maybe your feet, maybe your legs, and so on. Instead of leaning on and dwelling in your understanding, the mind, you acknowledge, you become aware, you discover, you feel. And if you do this, instead of just believing it or disbelieving it or accepting it or rejecting it, if you simply do this, you will find that you start to see Him in all things, to know Him in all. Now, I realize that at this point I will have lost the average Christian. Watching me on YouTube, you might be doing a thumbs down or talking about how I'm a servant of the devil. After all, if we cannot trust in our own understanding, our mental understanding, we will go to hell, right? If we simply become aware of the inside of God's temple, where His Spirit always dwells, without pulling in our own understanding into the equation, then we will become demon-possessed, or we will go crazy, or our lives will fall apart, won't they? Fear. Always controlled by fear. Is this too much for you today? In all your ways, acknowledge Him. Now, what does the word translated your ways mean? Well, it means this: the road, the path, the journey, direction, manner, habit, way of the course of life, of the course of moral character. Or we could say, become fully aware in everything, in all things. What things? Yeah, as you're driving, as you're waiting in line, as you're washing dishes, as you're listening to what the doctor says, as you're at work, as you're listening to an angry customer or to an angry boss. Be fully present now. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not dwell in or rely upon your own understanding. Know Him in all things, and He will direct your paths, making them plain and straight. Things become plain to see. Priorities become clear. The importance or unimportance of so many things you took so seriously take on a new meaning. As you are fully here with God in His temple, instead of lost in the head with your own understanding. And you will find yourself knowing Him in awe.